Okay, Yate everyone, which means it is good. Welcome, Shikedo Shitine, my family, my people, my friends and relatives. Shige Denae Shanidiin Yanshne Yohanagatni, one who walks around clan Tanishle, Korean Bashachi, Kintlachini, the Red House people, Dashache, Iligana, patriarchal colonizers, Dashanella. And in that way, I walk this earth as a Navajo woman. I'm currently located in Salt Lake City, but back and forth from where I belong and where my umbilical cord is buried on the Navajo Nation. My relatives live their lives in Burnt Water, um, and it's where my spirit, my Shimasana, my grandmother, my Shiche, my grandfather live. And lately I've been missing them so much, and I'll be thinking about them and their teachings with my involvement in the garden. So having said that, yeah, thank you all so much for gathering with me today. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the comments, however that feels good to you. At the end of the presentation, I will open it up to comments and questions. We have had such beautiful support already with the garden and much interest in how to be involved and how to help. So there's a lot to share with you all today, and I'll just go ahead and get started. This quote comes from Robin Wall Kimmerer from Braiding Sweetgrass. It's a pretty popular book in our communities, and really this book teaches us how to be in good relation, to learn from plants, their teachings, how they relate to one another, and how they provide us medicine and also contribute to how we understand ourselves as Indigenous people. The seed of this garden concept started when I received an invitation to collaborate with Natalia Long, someone I love and appreciate who currently stewards multiple gardens in Salt Lake City. It was their wish that we coordinate with the Indigenous community to offer them a space. From there, when Restoring Ancestral Winds team was planning initiatives, we all really gravitated to working with land. You know, we've been isolated in our homes for a long time. And I want to recognize that we live in a time where violence affects every nook and cranny of our lives. Truth is that we've been in crisis as a human population. We've lost so many to COVID-19, especially in our Indigenous communities. Many knowledge keepers and elders that are irreplaceable in our minds and spirits, and it was too soon to lose those folks. We also collectively understand that we are in a time where we are truly understanding that we can not go on the way that we have been under colonial control and governance that is inherently rooted in white supremacy. I'd also like to note that this month is February Teen Dating Awareness Month and Black History Month. Both our youth and their relatives, as well as our Black and Indigenous community, need tremendous recognition for their beauty, contributions to the world, to our tribes, to our teachings, and to our resilience. So the Carry the Water curriculum is funded by the Utah Department of Health under a TANF grant. The garden is funded and sustained by community. The land owned, and I put land in quotations because I think we as Indigenous people understand that we do not own land, but we are in relationship to land. But as things go, the land is owned by Libby Haslam. Some of you may know her. She runs the Design Build Bluff program and does a lot of sustainable building. She is an architect and a professor. So a yaha to Natalia Long for facilitating land back discussions and to Libby Haslam for their generous gift to the Indigenous community. The concept of this garden um, really comes from a matriarchal concept. Um, as Indigenous relatives, when we pray, we often pray with and to water. Water cleanses us, water remembers. Water was once our first home, a world of water within our creators. Water is the lifeblood of the earth. When we restore meaningful relationships with earth and water, we also return to ourselves and to our ancestral teachings. When we carry the water, it means that we walk in beauty, we carry medicine for our people and for ourselves, and we heal. Carry the Water and Indigenous Healing Garden is located on the lands of the Ute, Paiute, Timpanogos, Goshute, and Shoshone peoples, and will sustain these concepts of healing through water and connecting with land. I had originally used mission in our prior language for the garden, but for this presentation, I wanted to abandon what may be a term rooted in colonial religion and conceptualize as prayer. For me, prayer is an action. And when thinking about formulating this garden, it truly comes with many conscious actions and intentions I hope will be answered as blessings for our community, giving them real tools to heal and prevent violence in our precious communities. So Restoring Ancestral Winds will partner with individuals, organizations, and tribal members to provide a sacred space for knowledge sharing and violence prevention measures within our urban Indigenous communities of Salt Lake City, extending invitations to other relatives of color. That does not to say that our community builds and the support that we need. We wholeheartedly welcome that support from the non-Indigenous population. We will be providing a place of ceremony for youth of color, bringing in cultural practitioners and knowledge keepers to facilitate gatherings centered around restoring healthy relationships with an emphasis on healing from and preventing sexual and gender-based violence. We will reconnect with sacred teachings of land and water and embody our traditional ways of being. These are some of the garden protocols that we had come up with as a team. They will likely grow and evolve. One of the beautiful things that my director always says that I really appreciate as somebody who works and consults with RAW is you come as you are. You know, we all come with our own pains, traumas, and struggles. And mental capacities, physical capacities, and we're going to be very sensitive to those things. We come with clean hands conceptually. We come with clean hands, we come with good intentions, and also we ask that anybody who enters the garden have clean hands before entering the space to kind of prevent the viruses that are going around. We will practice smudging before entering the space, which will really set our intentions and put us in a good headspace. We ask that people not bring food made by corporations such as soda pop, hot chips, candy. I usually reserve that for my midnight snack. Wear a mask, sanitize for yourself and others. There are no hierarchies. Everyone is equal. We are humble. We take care of everyone. Everyone has knowledge to share, from the young ones to the old ones. We will practice reciprocity. Practice however you are most comfortable. Elders and children will be fed first, beginning with third gender, two-spirit, LGBTQAI, and others, and matriarchs. There will be no plastic unless absolutely necessary, such as like plant containers and soil bags. Those are really hard to avoid. If abuse and harassment, violence, or an assault were to occur, it will be addressed swiftly and with seriousness, and immediate protection of the victim will be enacted. In the work that we do at Restoring Ancestral Winds, we advocate for culturally appropriate services. Right now and historically, there have been a deficit of competent and culturally specific care and has led our people to feeling further harm and experience stigmatization in all areas. At the Garden, we hope to bridge those conversations with community, assessment needs, and with practitioners. In that, we will advocate with activities that understand that ways of knowing or understanding, that observing the natural world and the harmony and a balance that exists in a world gives us concepts and understandings of how to exist in that hajon, that balance and harmony. Traditional teachings are designed to teach ways of knowing that informs our ways of being, understanding that we are sacred beings. And data shows that approaching violence prevention measures with trauma-informed cultural humility training and training for programs serving Indigenous people, including the acknowledgement of two-spirit, third gender, and LGBTQIA, is what our people need and deserve. Cultural humility requires a recognition of historical traumas and persistent self-reflection to understand the context of the individual. This is a critical component to cultural healing. Services not rooted in cultural humility cause further harm, particularly for the Native youth who experience intergenerational and historical trauma. This came from a resource with the National Indigenous Resource, from the National Indigenous Resource Center, and we will integrate these holistic aspects of care that are required for healing. For example, individual strengths, establishing a sense of belonging, a nurturing environment, ancestral and cultural teachings connected to spirituality, self, family, and community, relationships, practiced teachings on what it means to be a good relative, having a really good, strong family support system. Community, systems of support for cultural values, traditional medicines, and healings for trauma and addiction, community understanding, access to mental health services and programs, and societal stuff demand the anti-stigmatization of survivors. There's actually big conversations going on in our community right now about this intergenerational trauma and sexual violence, and how we really need to center the survivors, let them tell their stories, honor them, protect them, and understanding that justice is not served until the victim is healed. And historical. We are a very resilient people, and we embody so many teachings that really support that resiliency. One of the most difficult things that we face as Indigenous people is the missing and murdered crisis. This excerpt was written by myself in collaboration with David Rios and his work dedicated to missing and murdered relatives at the UMFA, the Utah Museum of Fine Arts. And his work is bringing to light the experience of losing and healing from missing and murdered violence. I'm going to read that. The core of indigeneity is to be cosmically and earthly bonded to relationships. For Indigenous people, our lives, our ways of knowing and loving oneself is reliant on understanding that we are inextricably woven into other relations that extend into Mother Earth, outwards to Father Sky, including all elements and non-human relatives. As Diné Navajo people, the entirety of this understanding can be found within our homes. Our Hogans homes were given to us as teachings of the universe and more practically our worldview. For Diné, Home is matriarchal, with facing east, where the sun comes up, which is where we place our doorway, which leads into the womb. Our homes kind of represent the womb that we were in within our mothers. And that sustains our relationship to all directions and cosmic processes. At the center of our universe is the fireplace. Like Nahakosko, the North Star, the fireplace never moves. It is a central light that brings warmth and guidance to our humble consciousness. There are no rooms or separation between relatives in the creation of our homes. Instead, we are taught that as life is created within our home and womb, our lives are fulfilled by the full awareness of our young ones to our elders. We can see all that is taking place. We see generations of loved ones revolving like constellations. And just a side note, when I think about the rising rent and having more people in one household, that was always the Indigenous way. We always had all of our relatives in one household, and in that way we are aware of the health of those folks, their needs, their spiritual needs, and there's so much beauty within that. And this way of relating to one another allows us to be knowing and giving to the nourishment and stability of the minds, bodies, and spirits that circle the fireplace. This worldview extends beyond our hogans and has carried into the lives of colonized Diné as a protective prayer. And when I say colonized Diné, I would consider myself, because I'm living in not a traditional home, but I truly practice these things with my family. However, this most sacred teaching has been and continues to be violently disrupted in our homes and homelands. Surrounded and compounded by and extracted by colonization, Indigenous people experience a violence that has created a complex network of foreign activity within our homes and our homelands. When we experience violence in our hogans, or when a relative is violently removed from our hogans, murdered or trafficked into abyss, it disrupts and creates lasting fractures in our universe. It is a violence that affects all of our relations, including the land and waters that yearn for our return and the restoration of healthy family kinships, dating, and sexual relationships. Today we are taught that when the pain is unbearable, we return to the fire that knows us for love and guidance. It is where we give our prayers and smoke that travels to those we lost, where we often find them in the sky. So more fractally, as a community in Salt Lake City and beyond, I want us to really think about what is going on in our universe and what do we need to understand in order to heal. These are just some of the headlines to come out of the last couple of years. Speaking for myself, as an Indigenous person, Utah and Salt Lake City is a very difficult environment to live in. For somebody who knows a fraction of the tragic history of colonization here and sees the effects of what is happening today, I grieve for the state of our health, the land, water, and people, particularly our youth, who will inherit these dire consequences. To have harmed the ecosystems, land, air, and water to this extent was to first do this to the Indigenous people who have lived and existed in beauty here for time immemorial. To understand the state of things now, we have to understand and face these realities and acknowledge the very recent and silenced genocide that made this extent of colonization possible. I'm going to share a quote that I took off of the Timpanogos Nation website, and this was given to us by Chief Executive Mary Murdoch-Meyer. By the year 1909, most of our leaders were killed, many of them in the Black Hawk War. Our population decreased from approximately 70,000 to 1,300. Today, our population is close to 900. The newcomers called us Lamanites, the chosen people, who were chosen to walk knee deep in the blood of our ancestors, to suffer from white man's disease, to accept their ways and beliefs or die. Fighting to preserve our way of life. What choice did we have? Our ancestors' blood covers the Wasatch, and then we were forgotten. We were shoved aside in the name of progress. Yet, with all this, we remain. The time has come for the truth to be spoken. We are still here. We will not be brushed aside. We, the Timpanogos people, are the Indigenous people of Utah. We are Shoshone. The blood of our ancestors cries out to us. They must be remembered for who they really were. I wanted to share some of these preliminary and very sterile findings off the internet that for me represent a very dark history. This number has turned my stomach into knots, and I mourn at how low this population count is. There are many stories behind this number that I believe need to be shared, and it's truly time to honor the Goshute nations and their specific needs as a respected and sacred tribal nation. And let's take a look at what Wikipedia gives us as far as understanding what colonization has given to the Goshute. The Skull Valley Indian Reservation, which is located in Tooele County, about halfway between the Goshute Reservation and Salt Lake City, Utah. The tribe consists of about 125 people, of whom 31 live on an 1,800-acre reservation located in Tooele County. The Dugway Proving Grounds, which is a military project, lies just south of the Skull Valley. To the east is a nerve gas storage facility, and to the north is the Magnesium Corporation plant, which has had severe environmental problems. The reservation was proposed location for a 820-acre storage facility for the storage of the 40,000 metric tons of spent nuclear fuel. Only 120 acres are for the actual facility, and the rest of the land is buffer area. So the tribes of Salt Lake City have been pushed away from the places that have always sustained them, and what surrounds them is really, really toxic stuff. And these have really dire consequences. And what we know from missing and murdered violence is when we have extractive industries next to our tribal nations, the influx of foreign activity increases missing and murdered violence. This was also from Wikipedia, and I wanted to kind of point out that what we will find in a lot of the stuff online when it comes to Indigenous people is they will talk about us as if we are in past tense, as if we don't still practice traditions, still live off the land, are in good relation with other relatives, and even exist. And so we know that the Goshutes have always been extremely skilled and efficient in their use of wild plants. He took up farming as early as 1860 once they were being displaced by settler invasion, but they were also put on really poor land where things did not grow very well. The Goshute tribe, who are desert people, know and were traditionally in relationship with at least 81 species of vegetables, and we will look to the Goshutes for their knowledge of wild plants and introducing wild plants into the garden. Part of what the garden aims to do is abolish erasure tactics on Indigenous people. The Goshutes are still to be respected and honored for their knowledge and sacred ways of living as current and existing people, along with other tribes such as the Shoshone, who were very mobile and skilled at hunting and gathering. And with each change of the season, they traditionally migrated to obtain food and other resources they depended on to survive. The Paiute are known for their mobile lifestyle, including moving frequently and primarily according to the seasons and plant harvests and animal migration patterns. The White Mesa Utes are highly respected for their skills in basketry and weaving and are known for their horsemanship, marksmanship, and hunting skills. The Utes engaged in sophisticated gathering and hunting economy. They were beautiful seed stewards. Things like berries, roots, deer, rabbits, birds, fish are things that they eat. They are exceptional artists and create beautiful examples of religious and ceremonial beadwork and leatherwork. The Utes also have a beautiful relationship with horses and frequently incorporate horses into their art and culture, creating, for example, intricate saddles and paintings. For my tribe, the Diné, I feel like we're good at so many things. We are very beautiful farmers. We have a deep relationship to our animal relatives, and my grandmother specifically lives the life that is most beautiful to me as an Indigenous woman. She lived exactly where she belonged. She sheep herded. She did everything with that wool, treated her sheep as her own relatives, and fed her family and took care of many, many children. So we understand that healing from violence is violence prevention. Though I am representing from a Denae worldview, I kind of wanted to say something up front before I go into some of these teachings. We are in a time where we would truly recognize the harms that pan-Indianism has caused our people. We are diverse tribes, we are diverse nations as we are individuals. And I think it's important to teach from your respected worldview. And so instead of sharing knowledge from other tribes that I don't belong to, um, I'm going to just explain some of these things from my worldview. And within the garden, we hope that we will equalize those teachings and kind of merge and support those relatives who will participate in the curriculum to engage in their own sacred teachings. So the East represents our thoughts. The South represents our physical. The West represents our relations, and the North our home place. I had taken the four directions and the meanings and kind of implemented how I thought we could heal from missing and murdered violence. So the East, this directional light holds our spiritual intelligence. In a world with many fractures and traumas, Ha'a gives morning light to our prayers. It is when we communicate with the holy people, honoring those we have lost to violence, establishing gratitude and asking for a continuation of blessings. This direction is fundamental to our healing, sustaining our spirits with a new cycle of warmth and life. Shade at the south, as the sun enters, which translates to as the sun travels with and for me. It embodies all our responsibilities, planning and implementing of traditional teachings that keep us guided, aligned, and in beauty with all of our relations. When violence is inflicted upon us, there are teachings and blessings provided to us, given to us by our protective homelands that can bring us back into a place of balance or humbly. It also reminds us of how vulnerable our physical bodies can be when spiritually harmed. Restoring our right to fulfill our indigeneity, as well as healing through ceremony, is central to our overall well-being. Nahakos, the north. This guiding light represents our hogans, our homes, our homelands in relation to sky beings and the inherent worldviews as Bila Ashla, five-fingered beings. Within our hogans, the fireplace located at the center of our homes is a relative of the Nahakos Biko, the North Star, in which all relative stars revolve around, just as our relatives revolve around the fireplace within our hogans. When a relative goes missing, we go to the fireplace in the same way that we go to Nahakos Biko for guidance and safety. Iha, the east or the west, where the sun goes down. Iha guides our understanding of relationality. There are many teachings in Diné ideology that humbles our understanding of self. Our sense of self is activated when one fulfills their duties to their relations. In healing from missing and murdered violence, it is the idea that we will never understand ourselves, our pain, if we do not understand the full crux of violence perpetrated on all of our relations. Indigenous relationships are the foundation of Indigenous governance. When colonial violence removes or violates those relationships, it removes the entirety of generations into the future. And I'd like to thank my teacher, Marwana Benali, for providing some of these teachings. One of the central teachings of the garden will be on restoring pre-contact, third gender, two-spirit LGBTQAI identities and tribal roles. In my language, in Dinepazat, nadle means, at the root of the word is changing. It means fluidity around what we understand as gender and sexuality. That represents the bridge between what is implied achle, the balance of the complementaries. And that balance represents Hojan. We will discuss the violence on third gender, two-spirit, LGBTQAI identities and tribal roles currently. We will try to heal third gender, two-spirit, LGBTQAI identities and tribal roles. We will facilitate teachings of corn as two-spirit because it is, and it's so beautiful. And the sweat lodge that we will have in the garden, we will have third gender, two-spirit, LGBTQAI ceremonies in there. So when we think about the garden and all these teachings with relationships and how we relate to seeds and the teachings of plants, we, just like seeds, are knowledge holders and keepers. Seeds hold energy to create life from within. They need water to grow and activate that life. They need earth to be nestled into, heat and light for those energies to grow. Each plant holds and produces many seeds to begin this cycle again. Relationships and responsibility. So we understand that as Indigenous people, we consider the community to be us, not as community identity, but as ourselves. We are the community. In Diné, when I say Shimma, it means my mother, but the personal pronoun she, which also translates to I or me, um, it carries so much more than that. It it carries the people I belong to, the communities, the natural world, and in the universe. Consequently, relationality is at the core of all our interactions, including governance, education, decision making, analysis, research, healing practices, values, and morality, and much more. Therefore, balancing the domains of life, thinking and learning, working for one's livelihood, family, community, and social relationships. Reverence for the natural world is central to healthy, prosperous, vibrant peoples and communities. And this comes from our own Morone Benali. And we will discuss some of these things, and all these concepts can be applied to land, water, plants, food, body, spirit, identity, and healing. We will talk about Indigenous protocols versus settler protocols. What does it mean to have reciprocal relationships? What does it mean to experience extractive relationships? Universal relationships, origins. What are the origins of unhealthy relationships, and how do we heal those things? And one of my favorite things is that we will be discussing is asking for forgiveness, forgiveness of self, and offering forgiveness. Reconciliation and healing. The process of healing from trauma comes in many different forms and stages throughout our lives. Healing cannot be achieved without pain, without tears, and without intimacy. Healing is not a solitary journey, but one that requires relationships with the natural energy of the earth and understanding origins of trauma. We can achieve peace by building our personal relationships with empathy and compassion. Understanding how our own traumas affect how we love and behave is critical to our healing, because how we treat and understand ourselves is reflected in our relationships with others. And again, on land, plants, water, food, body, spirit, identity, and healing, we will ask questions regarding all of those elements. What are unhealthy relationships with food? What does unhealthy relationships with water look like? What does it feel like to have a fractured relationship in your life? Where did they come from? What are the behaviors our people adopted from boarding schools and other assimilation tactics? What is violence? How do we know when someone is hurt? How does it feel to hurt somebody? When someone hurts a relative, does it also hurt you too? What is our responsibility to a relative when they are hurt? When a neighboring community, tribe, nation is also hurt? We are coming out of a year where we've had dire news in our communities. Bodies of the Paiute children were believed to be buried at the former site of the Utah Indigenous boarding school. This is one of the first preliminary findings of Utah and the boarding schools and residential schools that took Native children away from their families, abused them, where they experienced a lot of sexual violence. And what we're now seeing is there are burial spots where Indigenous children were forced to leave their home and then never came home. So a special part of the garden will be dedicated to honoring the victims, survivors, and descendants of boarding school genocide and other assimilation tactics on Native children. Okay, what will the garden look like? Let me pull up, it's on PDF. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah. So the garden is located in Glendale at 1459 South, 1000 West. There's a sidewalk. We're going to have our main water source at the beginning of the plot. And right here, we're going to be reserving this spot for community compost. So folks in the neighborhood and other relatives who want to drop off their compost to be contributed to the garden health can just do this right here. Libby Haslam, this is her own private space.
Denae,
Yeah.
I don't see the part that you're talking about particularly. What we see on our screen is more by the parking lot and the shade house and shed.
Oh. Annoying. Just kidding. If I made it bigger, can you see? If I pulled it out.
Looks the same to me.
Yeah, it's kind of just staying still. It's not moving around right now.
Hold on. What about that?
Perfect.
Okay. Oops. Hold on. Okay, so the street, the sidewalk, there's a water source. There's a gap where it is the owner's private space where she can store some of the things that she needs to. Right here is a really cute little dirt street that we can drive down. This will be the first part of the garden, the larger portion. We will have a water source right here. We'll be fundraising for a shed that will be put here. One of the logistical issues was how do we get water from without using such a really, really long hose? Because this plot is near 1 acre. It's very, very long. There will be minimal parking here. It is our hope to build like a wiki up or facilitate with one of the respectable nations in creating a traditional shade house where we can gather, hopefully have like an outdoor oven, a place where we can cook. But yeah, we will be laying some water sources down, some pipes. And this is our main gathering space. So we will be surrounded by corn. Our gathering space is a circle, and we will have a central fire right here. There will be seating all around here, but cascading and surrounding us will be our memorial garden, in which we will grow medicinal herbs, have a section dedicated to orange flowers for boarding school victims and survivors. We will have another garden back here and sweat lodge. So we will actually be facilitating an upcoming sweat lodge depending on when those, we will be talking to Carl Moore. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him in our community, but he facilitates a lot of sweat lodge with his crew, and has offered to be involved in this part. So we will have like co-ed sweat lodge, women's only, third gender, two-spirit, LGBTQAI only sweat lodge. And yeah, I think it's beautiful. Let's see. Let me go back to my other screen. So again, that's what the garden looks like in full. What does the garden look like now? It looks like this. It's a very blank slate. But it is the beautiful land of the Ute, Paiute, Timpanogos, Goshute, and Shoshone
I'm
people.
not seeing the screen share.
Uh-oh. Hold on. Good?
Ooh,
Okay, good. So this is what the land looks like right now. So upcoming events. This is not totally facilitated by Rob, but uh, Jorge Rojas, an artist, an Indigenous artist in Salt Lake City, who is in charge of Good Deeds program, where they truly support and fundraise for nonprofits. And he had approached me about facilitating um, a pop-up art show and fundraiser, which will take place March 5th. I will personally be um, making little to-go bags of an Indigenous food tasting, which I'm excited about. The first portion of the event takes place from 4:30 or 4 to 6:30, which is the VIP preview, so you can have first dibs on artist artwork. It is said that we have 58 artists who are contributing, so it's so beautiful and amazing. Um, and we titled it Pollen Path. So I hope to see you all there. We will have a community build day. I haven't put out media for this yet, but I should follow up with that after this presentation. And that will be Saturday, February 26th. And that's one of the days. So all throughout February, we are accepting donations from noon to 3 o'clock. And we'll be there every Saturday and Sunday. And on this day specifically, I will cook y'all lunch. We do have an updated fundraising goal for some of the initial things, such as building the gathering space and laying some of the groundwork for the sweat lodge and also the irrigation. So this is our new fundraising goal that we hope to reach by March 15th. How can you stay involved? You can visit restoringancestralwinds.org to join our newsletter for updates on events, and some of the things that I shared today will be taught through community gatherings with cultural practitioners and also other forms of events. If you have any inquiries and want to be involved, you can email us at support@restoringawcoalition.org. If you would like to donate to the garden plot needs and sustainability, or forward this to somebody that you know may want to support the Indigenous community, our PayPal is Restoring Ancestral. And I think the best way to stay involved, if you do have social media, Facebook and Instagram, is to follow us on both. Yeah, everyone. I only touched a little bit of all the things that we want to teach, but I'm really excited to be a part of this. It feels really good. I think it's what many of our spirits needed in this time, being so isolated and continually being perpetuated by crisis in our large, small and large. And I will answer any questions if anybody has any. Yeah, Kat. Thank you, Catherine. All right, if anybody or if nobody has any questions, hi, Sos. So happy you're
Hi, thank
here.
you so much for this presentation. It was really amazing, and I will stay tuned on how I can be of support from afar.
Thank you so much, Sos. I really appreciate you. Sending you so
Likewise.
much love. Okay, good. Well, everybody enjoy their beautiful evening, eat some good food, and we will all be in touch. Yes, we are looking for firewood. The firewood is appropriate for the central fire, so we'll probably have a fire every time that we gather so that we can give blessings and pray for ourselves and smudge. And then also firewood to cook with, and also for sweat lodge. So yeah, we'll be needing ongoing firewood for the duration of the garden. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Yeah, going at.